Welcome, everybody. We're really happy to have you for this exciting session around water. Today's a special day for us at H2O Innovation. We're uplisting ourselves on the Toronto Stock Exchange, but it's also a special day at the global level because it's the World Water Day, and we're ecstatic to have an extremely qualified panel here with four experts to talk about water, to talk about water technology, to talk about water strategy, and to talk about water investments. I'll go right into introducing the panel, but first, maybe let me introduce myself. My name is Guillaume Clairet. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for H2O Innovation, and today I will be playing the host and moderator for this exciting panel. With me today, I'm pleased to introduce Deborah Coy, who's our water investment expert. She's been investing in water for the last 20 years. She's been associated with XPV Water Partners, the largest private equity fund in Canada solely focusing on water. She's also on the board of director of Axios Water, which is the water-focused arm of KKR, an investment fund managing over $770 billion in assets in the United States. And prior to that, she was also an equity analyst analyzing publicly traded companies for Janney Montgomery, one of the leading investment banking firm in the water sector. Deborah, welcome. Second, with us today, we have Mr. Tom Pankratz. Tom is our water technology expert and guru. He works for Global Water Intelligence, and he is the editor of two important magazines, the WDR, Water Desalination Report, which is the weekly magazine that all water executives love to read. It's a weekly publication, but more importantly, he is also the editor of the CTO section, the Chief Technology Officer section of the monthly magazine of Global Water Intelligence. Prior to that, he's worked for the largest water company in the world, Veolia, and also for one of the greatest and largest engineering consultant, H2M Hill, now Jacobs. Tom, welcome to the panel today, and thank you for being here. Last but not least, Bill Malarkey, who's the managing director of North America for Aman Advisors. For the one who don't know Aman, it's a really a trendy management consulting firm solely focused in water. Again, I like to refer to them as the McKinsey of the water industry. And prior to that, Bill has spent some time amongst the largest water utilities in the world, Severn Trent and American Water, which is now worth north of $28 billion in market capitalization. Bill, welcome to our panel. And last but not least is Frédéric Dugré. Fred is a mechanical engineer by training, and he's been building H2O Innovation for the last 22 years. This success story culminated in the award of the Water Company of the Year in 2020. Frédéric, yourself, you've been named in the top 25 global water leaders on the planet twice by the Water World magazine. And probably a most important function, you also happen to be my boss. So welcome today for this interesting sessions together. We're going to be covering five interesting themes around water today. The first one of which is quite close to my heart and all of our panelists, and it's around water reuse. And my first question will go to you, Bill, because it's an emerging market, and goes as follows. The water reuse seems to become a major trend, both for major industrial players and for some large municipalities and public water agencies. Could you tell our audience a little bit what you think are the main drivers causing this new focus on water reuse?
Sure, Guillaume. I think the main drivers that you see are sort of the competition for a finite resource. So you've got increased demand, and you've got a steady or even declining water supply that's out there. So you've got industrial players, like you're seeing some of the new chip companies that are chip factories that are being built in the U.S. having to put really extensive water reuse systems in place to become zero water users in order to get the permit to even build in certain areas. And you've got municipalities looking long-term at large groundwater recharge projects to try and maintain their sources of water. So a lot of it are those drivers of just needing to stretch the existing supply of water or recover degraded supplies. And secondly, and probably the more positive driver. Those are kind of negative drivers forcing people. But on the positive side, technology advances have made it much more affordable and much more economically feasible to do these kind of reuse projects. So I think that's also driving the demand that we see there.
We have built, among, the largest, water reuse facility across North America. We have the largest reference install base in terms of water reuse plants. And it's nice to see, to your point, Deborah, that we saw over the last couple of years an evolution going from mostly municipal, some municipalities being really early adopters and tried to push the idea about water reuse for indirect potable reuse, to now seeing a greater number of industrial customers embracing this concept of recycling their water, not only for ESG purposes, but to become, as he said, more independent on their water needs and less exposed to increasing tariffs, and also becoming more and more aligned with the regulations out there, to dispose less into critical areas. So I think H2O has technologies within the portfolio, strong expertise around membrane filtration, strong reference base, and this continuous and increasing focus towards industrial customers that will certainly benefit for the future years. So I'm truly excited about the trend on water reuse, because I would say it's not only a trend now, I think it's a necessity.
But the second topic we wanted to touch on is the one of mergers and acquisitions. And on that topic, I'd like to start back to you, Deborah, because I think we've all seen an incredible number of deals in the water sector happening in the last 2 years. 2021 was really big on mergers and acquisitions. Multiple acquirers are very active, and the multiples that they're willing to pay are as high as they have ever been, right? So I guess, could you comment on that? Do you know why this is happening? Is it mostly positive for the water sector as a whole, or not? What are your thoughts?
Well, I guess the positive side depends on whether you're the buyer or the seller, right? High multiples are nice for sellers, at least until they have to live up to the expectations that are created by high multiples. I think the reason for it is pretty simple. We have a tremendous amount of capital chasing a fairly small and fragmented sector on the private water side. So there is, because of some of the things we just talked about in terms of the big drivers, there's a lot of interest. There's limited deals to be done. So there's a lot of capital chasing these deals. And I think overall that's positive. The risk, of course, comes around whether expectations become too high. This has been a long history in the water industry where people think things can change faster than they sometimes do. And so then people get disappointed because it takes longer for technologies to be adopted or longer for change to happen in terms of spending. I think we're in a really interesting period right now where it actually looks to me, for perhaps the first time in my career, that the water industry may be living up to this, because there's a lot of money to be spent on upgrading infrastructure. I think we'll talk more about that. And there's also a lot of new interest around innovation. So it appears to me that the interest and the investor support for the sector is likely to be mostly positive.
In fact, another treatment process that we've all heard about or grown up with is lime softening, where you add lime to precipitate the hardness. Common for all sorts of water plants. You can remove that hardness now with a membrane using nanofiltration. So there's really a membrane for almost every application, or can be used in conjunction with any other process.
And we'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about regulations. I mean, regulations in the water industry are everywhere. They are, present for almost anyone involved, whether on the industrial, municipal side. So I think it's worth to touch on them. And my first question will go to you, Bill, because it's really market driven. And there's a lot of contaminants that are regulated in the water industry. But lately, it seems that all we can hear about, at least in the mainstream media, not necessarily the water-related medias, but the mainstream medias, is PFAS, PFAS, PFAS. Everybody talks about PFAS in the United States, at least. What is PFAS? Is that a market to pursue? It's definitely a market to watch. Is it to pursue? And what is creating that sudden attention to one particular contaminant when we know very well that there's so many out there that are also important?
Okay, so PFAS is definitely something to watch. It's an emerging contaminant. I'm not going to stretch my scientific knowledge by explaining too much about the compounds behind it, but it's a byproduct of a lot of industrial processes that were used for decades in the U.S., particularly with Teflon-related products. It was also in firefighting foam. So it's something that, for better or worse, it's definitely for worse, is widespread across groundwater in North America, and probably we'll see it in a lot of other markets as well as the awareness starts to rise. But where we are, and you referenced regulation early on, where we struggle now, there is a lot of recognition of the problem, but there are not uniform standards in place about what is the acceptable level of PFAS in water, and what standard then do utilities or industrial users have to reach in removing PFAS from a water supply. So it's definitely something to watch. There will be growth here, but it's not likely to be this tsunami that hits us soon of lots of spending on it. It's likely to take time for this to really hit its peak. So and as you remove it, it also it raises the question, and maybe I'm hoping Tom can speak to this a little, of what you then do with the contaminants once you've removed them, because now all you've done is concentrate them either in a brine or in solids that also need to be safely disposed of. So this is one of the big trends that are coming. That's coming. Other scare, in the past we've seen scares around things like arsenic, around cryptosporidium. They've generally been regional in nature. I think what we're seeing with PFAS is unique because it is really widespread, and it's being regulated on that state by state level, which makes it uneven.
All right, so our last topic for the day is going to be the infrastructure bill, the massive bill that the U.S. federal government announced, in which there was $55 billion that was dedicated to the water industry for water use project. So Fred, in closing, I mean, hearing all of that from our experts, do you feel that H2O is relatively well positioned to capture at least some of that new money, fresh money from the federal government?
Absolutely. I mean, first, this is in our backyard. In the United States and Canada, this is where we have most of our currently installed base. So large number of reference. More than 750 systems already installed in North America. This is where we have also our manufacturing plant. So by being able to make U.S.-made equipment, Canadian-made equipment on both sides of the borders, position us very favorably to capture a lot of this stimulus money. I think you're absolutely right, and I've been sharing that vision, for a number of years. Decentralization, small, mid-sized market. In the United States only, 80,000 of communities and municipalities we can count. 75% of them are serving communities of less than 200,000 inhabitants. Sorry. So this is clearly the market that we're trying to go after, the small, mid-size. This is where I think the membrane technologies can provide a lot of help, can advance a lot their water and wastewater treatment and water reuse. And this is what we have been doing and continue to do. I'm also excited, and we haven't talked about it, but I'm excited. I'm a firm believer of these new technologies and digital transformation. I think the current labor market, being so hard and challenging, will accelerate this transition to a water 2.0. Let's put it this way, finally. But now I think it's just a matter of time, because technologies are out there. It's just, to bring it together, put it together, and serve the small mid-sized industry where we are already very active into.